Good evening, guys. Welcome to Interaction with Professor GSK. So it's a second session of Interaction with Professor GSK. We are going to discuss one of the very important topic today, and this topic is we are going to discuss about our better half, of the world. So we are having a great personality today. She is very popular and she is a known personality in her domain. So we are very fortunate to have her for this session, interaction with Professor GSK. So we have this week Dr. Sapna, professor and head the School of Law, Christ University. I know her personally, and she is very active personality in the about law and in gender issues, and I really admire her as a leader. So I'm very much happy to have Dr. Sapna here to have a discussion on this particular topic. In my circle, at least in Karnataka, in Bengaluru, she is the right person to discuss on this particular topic. Dr. Sapna, welcome to the show Interaction with Professor GSK.
Thank you so much, Professor Harish. It is lovely to be speaking here with you. And for two reasons, like you rightly said, I think one thing is because, you have been my good friend. And secondly, because this is a topic which we have discussed and chosen, which is very close to my heart. Thank you so much for the very warm welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. To start with, Dr. Sapna, can you, share from your perspective, what do you mean gender in?
Yeah, see, basically, I think when we speak about gender, there are these two very important differentiations that we always tell. One thing is, how do you differentiate sex from gender? So when I'm speaking about sex, what I'm speaking about is the biological element. So when I say, it is the biology of a human being which we are speaking about. But when we are speaking about gender, gender has a much wider interpretation. It has a much wider connotation because gender is about a social construct. So gender is that element which is actually, given by the society, where society decides that this is how a man behaves, this is how a woman behaves, and therefore we are going to put them in a bracket. We are going to give them compartment, and it is in this compartment that they will live, they will do what they have to do, and then they're going to move forward. So this basically is the gender that we are speaking about. But going on from there further, there is another thing that I think during the course of our talk I have to make it clear. That is, when I say gender, gender includes all the three genders. So we are speaking about the women, we are speaking about the men, we are speaking about the LGBT. But for this discussion, what I'm looking at is the women issue. So I'm only looking at women as a gender for this discussion.
Yeah. See, here I have a further I need a further clarification. If that gender is, related to one's quality and character, or it's just like, if it's just a sex. The sex is different from gender, as you told. So how do you decide, I belong to a particular gender? See, we are talking about transgender and LGBT, all these people. In that case, it's more about your emotional and physical identity. So how do you differentiate this emotional and physical identity as a gender? So some bit of.
Okay, see, let's just put it this way. Now, when we are trying to explain gender as a social construct, I also want to take you a little on to the gender stereotypes that exist in the society. Now, I was just doing this, this talk just about a couple of days back, and this was on gender stereotyping in the society. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how this gender stereotypes work and how it comes on to become a very solid structure in the society, very deep rooted and pervasive, almost that it becomes a flavor of social inequality. Now, say for example, now if I have to tell you where it all begins, now let us take the example of, a child is born. Now, maybe in a signal or you're going on a road or somewhere, you generally see vehicle with a blue balloon and a pink balloon. Now, it does not take much guess for us to identify, the blue balloon means it's a baby boy inside the vehicle. And if it is a pink balloon, it means there is a baby girl in the vehicle. Now, almost it heralds that blue means it's a boy, and then if it is a pink means it's a girl. Now, let us just very quickly look at the color psychology also. See, basically, when you have to define what is the meaning of psychology, psychology is about the mind which drives our behavior. So that basically is what we mean by psychology, and that is what we define by psychology. Now let us just very quickly take a look at this color psychology also. I mean, I'm in pink today, and that is just a coincidence. That's
I'm
all.
with light blue.
Before anybody would actually point that out to me. So like that, basically it is said that the color pink means something that is docile, and something that is smooth, something which is very smiley, and a toleration, where there's a need to be accepted. On the other hand, when you're speaking about blue, now there are these three words which actually struck my mind and which I'm able to remember. Now when you say blue, what blue actually means is that it means it is cool, it means it is confident, and it also means that it has the privilege to be aloof. Now, these are not something that I have put into my own thing, but this is something which is going by the dictionary meaning. So when you start from the dictionary itself, and when you're trying to understand this is what blue means and this is what pink means, you understand that, there is a psychology which is actually working. Now, just keep going down the lane, and then you will understand. Now, say for example, if you just type in the Google, the gift that you can give to a 5-year-old boy and 5-year-old girl, now you will understand that what you're giving to a girl is basically a Barbie doll, or you're going to give her a miniature cooking things. And what you give to a boy is, now, say for example, I have a nephew who's very much interested in this Lego toys. Now, this is all about construction. How you put things together, and then you make it into a construction thing. So if you're going to give that to a boy, it is going to be more about a mechanic set, a construction set, or something like that, which is actually testing your capability and your mind application. So do we understand? Somewhere we are getting marinated into that culture. We are getting marinated into a culture where the society is telling right from the beginning what you should think. Now you say, for a girl, this is what you think, and for a boy, this is what you think. We are not even giving them an opportunity how you should think, but we have told them, this is the way you think, this is what you think. So that is where the gender stereotypes begin. And when the gender stereotypes begin, they grow and they grow and they multiply, and they multiply to such an extent where gender stereotypes becomes that very strong gender inequalities. Gender stereotypes become the paramount cause for the gender inequalities in the society. And this is just a winning recipe for gender bias. So this is where it basically starts. So, you understand when we say we define gender by social construct, this is what we basically mean. It is a social construct because society has constructed that. And society says this is how it has to be. And society defines what gender will have to do.
Yeah, exactly. You are correct, madam. Here, I put it very simple. From your discussion, it's all social conditioning. Okay, all social conditioning, and why this social conditioning is happening. And if you look at the history of, history of human civilization, can you throw some light on, how, as a woman, the other part of this human civilization struggled over the period of time, to coming out of this social conditioning. For you, coming out of the social conditioning and proving yourself, apart from your gender, proving yourself as a personality, as a, a human being. So, what are, can you just throw a light, how this evolution happens, to come out of the social conditioning?
Right. Now, generally, whenever history teaches us lessons, isn't it? We always look at the past for our future and to build our future, and that's such a foundation, and that's the reason why you look at the history. Now, if you're looking at the historical, aspect, now say for example in India itself. Now, I mean, even when we have to go right back, and when you look at the period of the Vedic period, you understand that there was actually not much differentiation between a man and a woman, because man and woman were on the same pedestal. A woman was allowed to do religious practices, which was supposed to be the highest order that is given to a society. Now she could have education. We had one of the best women scholars during those times. So there was not much difference. But by and by, when the society went on, and when a lot of things came into the society, we realized somewhere these kind of culturing began to happen. Now, that is the reason why you see, I mean, without going too deep into the history, let me just flag two very important points. Now, sati was always there for a woman. Now, the whole point was that, the Hindu tradition of sati, where it was said that a man and a woman are made for each other in marriage, and a man dies, a woman goes along with the man. She's burnt on a funeral pyre, and it is said to be a voluntary entering into the funeral pyre, to be burnt on the funeral pyre. Many of the times during those times, the woman who was burnt on the funeral pyre was about an 18-year-old girl, a 16-year-old girl, a 14-year-old girl, considering that child marriages was so common during those days. Now, how could this child who is of 14 years of age, 16 years of age, and 18 years of age decide that she wants to end her life because her husband has died? But on the other way, if it was for a man, on the death of a woman, he would become the most eligible bachelor. Maybe within a year or in a very short time, the man would be married off. The same thing did not happen to a woman. So, and there was another thing that has always struck me. Now, say for example, widowhood. Now, widowhood was such a, she was almost a social outcast. A woman was a social outcast because she became a widow. Now she loses her husband without any fault of hers, and then this woman becomes a widow, and then she's given the title of a widowship, where she becomes a social outcast. She's looked upon as a bad woman in the family. She's not even treated well by her family members. Forget about the society. Now this is the way that she lived, and it took a lot of social transformation, particularly during the independence time, to actually come out of this kind of a thing. So I think historically also there has been violence and abuses of women, and that has been in plenty. So that is the reason why when you learn from history, you understand that it is widespread, and this inequality against gender is deep rooted. And how deep rooted it is, we have been seeing in history. It has been quite deep rooted, and it has been there at all the times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
By coming up with the one, a very famous casual saying in the families, and a very successful man. Every time, a successful man used to say, "A woman behind the success." Okay, so why we always keep women behind success. So we won't bring her into the front face of the success. But at the same time, when we go for problems, or when we face a crisis, and the first victim is used to be a woman, and who used to be a girl child. Okay, and now with this is a COVID time. We are facing a very pandemic crisis these days. And here also, I can find that there are a lot of gender inequality by reading newspaper and by observing lot of things. We can very well say there are a lot of gender inequality things are happening in the family, in the system. Can you just to throw some lights where actually all these gender inequality begins, with specific to this crisis time, problem time? What is the psychological mindset and attitude behind putting a woman in the front whenever there is a problem or whenever there is a crisis, and the other end putting a woman behind the success, and I'll be happy to say a woman is behind a man. So what is your take, ma'am?
Professor Satish, that was a long question. But anyway, let me just break that question into two parts. The first thing is that, whenever we used to say that, or whenever, people do continue to say that behind every successful man, there is a woman. Again, like I was telling you, I think it is that gender conditioning at its zenith, because every time that a woman has said that she's there behind a man, probably giving the benefit of doubt, there are two ways that you look at this perspective. Now the first perspective is that the first thing is that is it that you're trying to tell again and again, is it that you're trying to reiterate to a woman that your place is at home, your place is a step behind the man. So it is when you are a step behind, you actually provide success to a man in your family. And don't forget, that is a good girl image. You see, that is how a good daughter in law is, that is how a good daughter is, and that is how a good wife is. Now, if a woman does not get into this bracket of good, now in all probabilities, what is her stake is her very character, where a stigma attaches to her, and she might be made to feel guilty and apologetic, where she will have to say that I'm sorry, maybe I should not have done this, and I should have behaved like a woman. So behaving like a woman was meant to be taking that step back. The reason why you must have noticed that I'm using this in past tense is because I think slowly we are little bit coming out of the bracket, not much, but little bit trying to come out of the bracket. So the other perspective is also that maybe, giving the benefit of doubt to understand that you give your due to the woman and try to say that as my better half, she has supported me, not necessarily by staying at home, but shoulder to shoulder, where she has come with me and she has supported me. So that is a very generous, compliment to be given to the society. So there could be these two perspectives. But nevertheless, one perspective has always been, from what we have seen, from what we are used to, is that, a woman is always a homemaker who should be happy being at home, making everything comfortable at home. So you have this, very grand model about how a family should be. You have one person who's going out to work, who's the bread earner of the family. He's the macho man. And then you have the woman who's the docile, tolerant type, who's going to be at home, making everything that is comfortable. So maybe one perspective of that was trying to reiterate that and trying to say that, see, this is where you're supposed to be, and don't forget. But the other perspective, like I just told you, is that giving a very generous interpretation of that. And I just hope that it is true in every case. That is, trying to say that she was my better half and who moved with me shoulder to shoulder, and therefore I see this success. So this is that one part of trying to answer that question. Now, let us just try to understand. I think this has been the trump card and the main reason why Professor Satish actually invited me on air to speak about the pandemic and gender inequality.
Yeah.
Now, the question was that, when we are trying to research, does pandemic create a surge in gender inequality? My answer is an affirmative. Yes, it does. It does create a surge in gender inequality. Now, slowly going by the way and being aligned to what Professor Satish will have to take us through his questions, I think I will be able to tell you how this gender inequality surges during COVID-19.
Yeah, with very specific, you came to the center point of our discussion. So that is what we want to give focus today. See, I think, for the last 4 months, almost we are being at home, and it's a very rare occasion families get time together. Husband and wife gets time together. So normally we work in the, these days, husband and wife, when we work, we rarely get time to be together. But when we get time together, actually it should strengthen the relationships. But in spite of strengthening the relationship, I can find a lot of issues are arising. Issues are coming in between the couples, and the woman helpline, announced by the government is all the time it is ringing, and a lot of people are, women are approaching that. See, when you compare to the normal days and the pandemic times, the number of phone calls to this woman helpline is actually being increased. I have just wondered because when you are being at home with the family, the relationship should be strengthened. In spite of that, it is happening the other way. Why it is so, madam? So
Let me just, this answer will be as long as your question, Professor Satish. The reason is because this is one research that I think which is a very interesting thing, and which also brings to light something that is not as idealistic as we think it is. Now, just understand, when you say home, for any person, home is something which has protection. Home is something which should give security, whether it is for a man, whether it is for a woman, or whether it is for a child. So, the very meaning of home gives us the feeling of security. But we understand that it is not really so. Now, this might be a little too idealistic, and the percentage of this idealism is a very small percentage, and the reality bites. The reality is barbaric, the reality is inhuman, and the reality is quite strong, speaking the other way. Now, when I'm saying all these things, this is strictly evidence based and evidence built. When I'm speaking like this, I have taken my study from the ILO reports, from the UNICEF reports, from the WHO reports, from the NCRB, National Crime Record Bureau of India, when I'm telling about all these things and try to summarize. Now, let us understand, when we speak about violence against women, now what kind of violence against women are we looking at? Now, let us take the example of domestic violence, or bride burning that happens because of dowry, or the cruelty that happens. Now, all these are the things which basically happens because a woman is at home. So just try to understand. Just give me a second, Dr. Satish. Do you
yeah,
have
please.
any? Just yeah. So just I think there was a little this one where I'm just asked to just turn this side. Yeah.
No
So basically what happens is that so let us just understand that all these violences, all these abuses against women basically start from home. It starts within the four walls, and it is not outside the home. Now, given this understanding, where is the sense of security for a woman inside her home? Where is the sense of safety for a woman inside her home? Basically, what she calls home is the place which is the breeding ground for violence against her. Domestic violence happens against women inside the four walls, and outside people don't even know what is happening because it all happens within the four walls. And don't ever forget, there is a huge taboo, there's a huge stigma that is attached to cases on domestic violence because women are cultured not to speak about it. Women are cultured to maintain the family because it is her solemn duty to do that, irrespective of how a man is, whether he is alcoholic, whether he brings home any income or he doesn't, whether he's violating her or whether he's keeping abuses on her. All these things apart, a woman has this important role to maintain her family. So naturally, all these things happen at home. Now let us understand why COVID particularly brought in this surge. Now, there has been a plethora of research regarding this. Like I was just telling you, you just take the report of ILO, the 2020 COVID pandemic and women report, or you take the United Nations report, or India also has done so many reports. And like you yourself rightly pointed out, the women helplines are just working 24/7. They are receiving so many complaints. The Women's Commission is receiving so many complaints. I am personally dealing with so many NGOs which is receiving so many complaints relating to domestic violence. Now, all these studies, what I have read, what I have spoken to, and from what I have understood, see, this is how the circumstance look like. Now, understand, now there is a woman at home and her violator is her intimate partner. So when I say intimate partner, this is a technical term to say maybe he's her boyfriend or she's in a living relationship with him. He's her partner or a husband or many times a brother also, whatever. Now when she was violated by any one of these people, now work actually allowed her to go out. Work actually allowed her to actually step out of the house. But understand, now that is not there. With lockdown, what has happened is that she's actually bound inside the house. And this inside the house is not a safe one. This inside the house is a place where her violator is. Inside the house is the place where the perpetrator of that offense is. So naturally, it is understandable that, and don't forget, added on to this, what compounds the situation, what magnifies the situation is that now we are going through economic slowdown, we are going through job insecurity, we are going through monetary problems. Compounding to all these things, a woman becomes an easy victim. Now, that is why we have seen that during the pandemic times, during the lockdown times, violence against women has taken a surge, and that is the reality.
Yeah, exactly. You have touched up almost, the all the cause of concern, what is happening within four wall. Personally, I too see unintentionally and unconsciously, the men in general. Sometimes I too realize by mistake, the people like me, we are aware of all this. Still, since we are built up and we are socially conditioned by many things, sometimes we also not able to treat our better off in a proper way. It all happens because of that social conditioning. I was able to realize later, sometimes when I use some word, and after that I was able to realize, but it all happens because of this social conditioning. If I am not wrong, actually, the culture in the family is actually being largely developed by the woman itself, right? It's not a men, I think. So woman's role in building up a culture in the family, within the family. So, as a mother, the woman looking at the other woman as a mother, as a mother-in-law, and, from different relationships. So, what is the role of women and men in developing the culture, the family culture, treating equally? So, what is happening in the family on this? I just want a clarity, but I also need a clarity on this personally.
Yeah, I'll just tell you one illustration. Let me just tell you one example. Now, this I've seen it on a very personal front, at a very close quarters. Now, I had this, one admin staff in my, a previous engagement. And this lady was a blue collar worker who was a sweeper. Okay. Now she used to come to the office and she used to sweep every day, and then we got on to talking. In fact, I was discussing the same thing in one of my other talks also. Now, this lady, what she told, it seemed to have a very deep impact in my mind. Now, she was telling that she has a daughter, and she's very blessed that her daughter is very well off, and she's very well settled. Now, I was naturally curious because I wanted to know that what does she mean by her daughter being blessed, and she was thanking the Almighty now and again, and what is the reason for this whole thing that she's speaking about. Now, she said her daughter was married, and the person to whom she's married is an alcoholic who generally does not go to work. Now, even though sometimes when he goes out to work, whatever the earnings that he gets is just probably sufficient to, sponsor his own drinks and nothing more than that. But just mind you, the reason why she said that her daughter is still lucky was because she was trying to pronounce the point that even with all those things, one thing that this man is not doing is that he's not being physically abusive of the wife. So she was trying to make a point. It's okay that all these things are there. It's okay that he is not taking the responsibility so long as he's not endangering my daughter's life. So you are absolutely right when you said this conditioning happens. And who does this conditioning? This conditioning, this conditioning, do you think women are doing this conditioning? And many a times, like we say, are women the enemies of the women? Now, let me just answer this also to you and just get a little bit of clarity. Now, just see, where do we all live? We live in a patriarchal society. We live in a male dominated society. The society is structured by what a male thinks, The society is structured by what a man wants. So we do live in a male dominated society where, there is male supremacy and women subjugation. Now, maybe there are exceptional cases, but this is the rule, and there could be exceptions to this rule, which is a totally a different thing altogether. Now, given this, if we try to say that it is the woman who's trying to be an enemy of the woman, and it is a woman who's conditioning this, please try to understand where this woman is coming from. She is also in a patriarchal society. Now, when she's thinking, she's not really thinking about herself. It is not totally her subjectivity, but her emotions are cultured by a patriarchal society. Now, what she's doing is right or wrong is not right or wrong from her point of view. She's doing what is right or wrong according to what her husband thinks is right or wrong, or according to what her son thinks is right or wrong. So understand that her conditioning also has happened because of the patriarchal society that she's living in. So that is the reason why, whenever we speak about women's studies and whenever we are speaking about the feminist research, now one thing that we always say is that there should be the change of the mindset. Now, how difficult it is, how easy it is, how we have to do it, that's a different thing altogether, which probably Professor Satish is going to ask me during the course of this interview, and I'll be able to tell this. But what I'm saying is that to say that a woman is a woman's enemy, I think it would not be the very right way to say, because when she's doing the conditioning, she's just aligning her conditioning to a patriarchal society because she's helpless. So that is the reason why the conditioning goes on like this.
Yeah, true. You are exactly true. I just asked this question to audience to get to know all about this. Okay,
Yes.
so the questions what I'm asking are not my personal. I'm asking it for the the participants would get exposed into all these things. See, when it comes to this, the discussion what we are discussing today, the education is the one thing actually makes a woman empowered. Okay, so starting from schooling to higher education, woman is being neglected or being biased even in terms of giving education and the choices of the courses. If you look at the choices of the courses which the families are suggesting for male and female is totally different. So there are a lot of gender inequalities from the KG to higher education. I think you served at a different levels and different positions in the higher education. So with your wide experience in the higher education, you moved with lot of people, especially with girl childs, and you also moved with a great researchers in both the gender. So can you share how this education empowers women and what are the gender inequalities are being there in education sector starting from KG to higher education? I would like to know from you, ma'am.
Yeah. See, basically, to answer this question, I think one thing that we need to be cognizant about is that when we are speaking about women, see, women, the whole gender is not a homogeneous gender. It's not that when you say women, we are looking at all women in the same platter. So, women as such are heterogeneous in nature. That means you have different kinds of women. You have educated women, you have uneducated women, you have migrant, then you have people who are not migrants, then you have people who are economically well off, socially well off, people who are not socially well off. So just like any other mankind, the gender also is not homogeneous in its nature. So I think this is how we need to understand about education and gender. Now, when we're understanding about education and gender, see, one thing I would definitely like to flag is that now, say for example, you take the economically the lower background. Now, one thing I have seen is that if they are economically weaker background. Now, say for example, I have seen with our own domestic helps who come to our house, or say for example, you have a security at home and they have children, or these kind of women who are there in the unorganized sector. Now, one trend that I have observed, and which I have also done the research, and my study also relates to a good extent on this, is that now many a times for them, education to their daughters is a luxury. It is never a rule. But on the other hand, their sons are actually sent out to work. Now, just understand, these are the families which are already in the lower economic, status. Now, when they're in the lower economic status, the whole argument is that they require their daughters to do the household work. They require their daughters to take care of their younger siblings, and they require their daughters to look after the other things in the household when both the man and the woman go out to work. Either they go out to work as a construction worker or as a domestic help or whatever it is in the unorganized sector. So this is one strata of the society that we see where education to girl child is at its minimum. I think you hardly get a handful where you say that, here is my girl child whom I'm sending for work. You hardly get, anybody saying that. It's just a handful. But on the other hand, when you're looking at the middle income group, I think slowly the mindset is definitely changing that, women are given education. But then again, there is a difference when you're speaking about education. Like you rightly pointed out, I think, more in arts, science, nursing, and, humanities, we find there are more girls. But on the other hand, technology and science and cybersecurity or, things like that, you find there are more boys. Now, this again is because of the gender stereotype, which is so strong in the society where the society thinks women is good in care facilities, so maybe it is good if she goes as a nurse. But on the other hand, a man is good in doing something else, application of his mind, so maybe it is good for him to go as an engineer. But one thing that is definitely a very heartwarming and very positive is that I think this is slowly coming down now. Now, say for example, even in my previous engagement where I was heading the law school, I saw that there was a very less gender gap. There were as many girls as there were boys in the legal profession, and like that, when I have just researched further, also I have found that the percentage of girls has increased. But then again, it also depends upon, it is also subject to the strata of the society that this girl is coming from. But otherwise, I think it is now slowly, it is now picking up. But another thing that is very alarming is that, another thing that is very starking is that now women do get educated, maybe in engineering, maybe in law and all those things. But the whole point is that that gap which is there between education and the job, you find that there is a leaking syndrome. Now, this is what we call as the leaking pipeline, because in the pipeline, when a woman has to walk from her education to her job, somewhere you know that she misses out and she just gets into the holes and she falls out. Now, this is a very alarming thing, and this is a very important thing that we need to notice. On one hand, she does get the education, but all those people who get the education are not really coming for jobs at all. Now, just take a look at the statistics and we will understand the percentage of female labor force has come down from 36% to almost 28% or 26%. I mean, this is a very stark thing, and this is something that is almost moving on a very dangerous trend. So, on one hand, you have education, which takes so many different factors, and apart from education, now let us say that she's educated also, but education and job does not go hand in hand. Somewhere, the chain is broken.
Yeah, as you rightly said, the choices of education for women is being, directive. You need to select this, you need to go for this. Even after you get into MBBS, most of the women will finally land up with child specialist, gynecologist, all these things, instead of going for other specialization. Even in law, also, probably, if I'm not wrong, you people may specialize in gender or women. It's not something, how many women lawyers are being excelling in crime, in the, intellectual properties. Again, everything, I can see some, even with the empowered woman, I can see some kind of self-conditioning. Okay, so it's my personal, I'm just my observation I'm asking, because you yourself, conditioned yourself. I need to go with this, even after you empowered, even after the different levels of your education and research. Why we are finally landing up with a few choices? I can see some self conditioning here, even after lot of empowerment. Why it is so?
Yeah, see, there was this very interesting research that I had come across during the course of my, doctorate, and this was a very beautiful article which said, "Is women throwing away the chances herself?" Now, is it that she's got everything on her? I mean, what it was made to look like is that just like a man to a woman also, everything is given, but then why she's not taking things? So is she denying this to herself? By herself, is she putting that self constraint? Was it was a very beautiful article. Now just try to understand. Now for a woman and for a man, the ladder is very different. Now let me just allow you to picture how this ladder looks like. Now for a man, now say for example, if you have to climb up your your profession, and this you will take the help of a ladder, then this ladder will very conveniently have 10 steps. Okay, so you climb one step and then you go to the other and then you go to the other, so you reach the top. But for a woman, do you know how the ladder looks like? I have a ladder with two poles, and then I have one rung of the ladder which is right on the top. So I don't have anything. So, as against 10 steps for a ladder, I have just one step to a ladder. What I mean by this is that just try to visualize and just try to picture this. Now, the reason why I'm telling this to you is because, see, for a man, when he finishes his education, and then it is his job. See, it is the job of a man is the most important thing for not only himself but supposed to be for his family also. Like I said, the grand idea that he's the breadwinner of the family, so we are all there to help him and support him. The reason is because he's going to get the food on the table. But as against a man, vis-a-vis for a woman, what happens if she has to go for work? The first thing is that she's told, first thing is that it is your secondary income. The second one is that, mind you, nobody asked you to go out to work and fend for the family. It's a different thing altogether if she's a single woman. But then otherwise, the majority is that, see, we didn't ask you to go out for work and we didn't want you to fend for the family, you see. And then don't forget, she has her motherhood penalty. Now, that is a major thing. If a woman is confined for 9 months and 6 months after that, what would have happened? One thing is either maybe in her employment, they will tell her that we are not going to give you, we don't want to continue in the job, maybe because you have not completed 1 year, you have not completed 2 years, or we don't have a policy like that. So she's made to resign on her own. Voluntarily, she's made to resign. Or maybe they will tell her that we will continue, but don't expect, anything. Don't expect that you will come back to the same position. So maybe she's trying to compromise to a lesser position. So you understand? So these are the penalties which a woman faces. She faces the penalty of motherhood during her life. She faces the penalty of other women-specific things, maybe like a menstruation, or maybe like an abortion, or a miscarriage, or things like that. Now, just try to understand, if the society makes a sweeping statement to say that, who asked you not to work? Who asked you not to get promotion? And the society does not support a woman when she is in the family way, when she has conceived, post delivery. If the society is not supporting her, then how do you expect a woman to be on the level playing ground? In what way do you think the woman will have a level playing ground? So it is so easy to say that it is being given same for a man and a woman, but when you really look at it, you understand that the reality is different. It is not so. And many a times woman becomes that primary caregiver of the family. She's the person who takes care of the elders in the family. She's the person who will have to cook in the family, who will have to take care of the children, who will have to take care of the education of the child. Now, considering this, she is in a double employment. She has one employment which she's doing, and then she has that huge unpaid employment when she gets back to work. So, frankly, it is not a level playing ground at all for a woman. It might look so, but it is not really so.
Yeah, to bring this level playing and to bring this gender equality in the different spheres of life, starting from family to education to work environment, I think one good solution is effective gender education, not sex education, gender education. That is very much important. Why? Because as a man, I know all through years I got to know about the woman and their side of maturity and their wishes and all these things after I get married. At least a few of things I will get to know only after married. And women actually get to know about all the physical and psychological changes of the men in very very early in their life. But men never gets a opportunity to get to know about this gender qualities and gender education. I think one of the better solution is relies on this gender education, educating the male childs on this gender education. I think probably that may solve some of the yeah, conditioning problems which is being with the males. So that is what I think. Just an observation on your view, Dr. Sapna. Yeah. Yeah, let's move on. Actually, we have discussed education and we have discussed a lot of your fundamental things about this gender equality and gender inequality. I would like to just to move from education to work environment. Okay, whether it is a family, so we have discussed the gender inequalities issues in the family, and we had a discussion on the gender inequalities in the higher education from KG to higher education. Now, I would like to know about what is the gender inequality. What is the degree of gender inequalities is being maintained at the work environment. So after education, you people are got an opportunity to work in the work environment, but even there lot of issues and lot of problems are coming. Particular to this pandemic time itself, I was reading a news item in a newspaper that there was some official meeting is went on between a male colleague and a female colleague. A male colleague misbehaved even in the virtual conversation when the official meeting is going on. So, how do you see this degree of the harassments? Okay, I'm being very specific. We are moving from gender inequality to the specific issues. How you are seeing this sexual harassment from a child to a girl child to a 50-year-old woman or 60-year-old woman? It happens irrespective of ages, and it happens irrespective of your hierarchy. It happens irrespective of your places. So your take on this, Dr. Sab?
Yeah, see, basically, if you're looking at gender equality in the workplace, since the time that men and women went to work, I think there was nothing like equality in the workplace. So this whole equality always almost appears to be a very idealistic thing, and as such, there is no equality in the workplace. Now, of course, things are now changing to the extent that people are becoming gender sensitive. To understand that gender sensitive will lead to productivity of the organization, and therefore it is important that there has to be a gender sensitive workplace. But let me just tell you that there are many kinds of things, like you have gender discrimination, then you have sexual discrimination. All these things are at play in the workplace. Now, when you just look at the statistics and when you just look at these kinds of things, you realize that it is commonplace in workplace. There is gender discrimination. Now, when I say gender discrimination, I make a point to distinguish it from sexual harassment. Gender discrimination refers to those kinds of discrimination which a woman takes only because of her gender. Because she's a woman, she takes that. Now, even when we teach the law students, there is this one important case that we say, which is called as Air India versus Nargis. Now, this was a case which was not too long ago or way back. This was a 1982 case where the Air India had brought about a regulation which said the woman air hostess will have to retire either at 35 years of age, on marriage, whichever is earlier. So, and there were, few other conditions also along with that. Now, say, for example, on the childbirth and things like that. Now, these were the conditions which did not exist for a man. So, why did the woman have to retire when she is 35 or after her marriage, which a man did not have to do? The whole point here that was explained was that a woman in her role had to look very young and charming. So the reason why she was taken for that role was only for this feminist attributes and for nothing else. Now, in this case, the Supreme Court came down very heavily and said this was a case of gender bias. This was a case of gender discrimination where this regulation was quashed. So the whole point that I'm trying to say is that when you're speaking about gender discrimination, there are many biases and discrimination that happens in the workplace only for the reason that she's a woman. Maybe she will not be considered to be on the board of a company. Maybe she will not be considered to head something. The reason is because she might not have the capability of a leadership. Why does she not have the capability of a leadership? Because don't forget that she might now and again say that she will have to go back home to look after her family. So there could be so many things like this. But one definitely very positive thing is that I think the organizations nowadays are becoming gender sensitive. Say, for example, even in my previous engagement, I did head a department, and I'm doing it even now. So what I'm saying is that this thing has been, a positive nowadays. So the gender sensitivity is becoming very positive nowadays. Now, so far as the sexual harassment is concerned, I think it is a totally different ballgame altogether. So when we are speaking about sexual harassment at workplace, much has been written about it. There has been so many cases relating to that, and particularly after the 2013 Act, that has been brought into the forefront, where there is a lot of awareness being created. Now, very quickly, let me just summarize about the sexual harassment of women at workplace. Now, this Act, it reads, prevention, prohibition, and redressal, making it very categorical that the legislative intent is to look at this menace in this way. Do everything that you can in your organization for prevention, prohibition, and only then the curative thing, that is redressal, comes. So the first thing that the legislature is looking at is the preventive measure, and only then it is speaking about the curative part of it. So like this, sexual harassment is also quite, it is not that it has gone away because of this act. In fact, the evidence speaks the contrary. There has been quite an increase in sexual harassment at workplace, and it is there. So these things do exist at the workplace.
Yeah. To be very specific, you have exactly covered the difference between sexual harassment and gender discrimination. I would like to get what a woman supposed to do when she is discriminated by gender, and what a woman should do when she is sexually being harassed. So can you give some guidelines on these two? For probably that may be helpful for a common woman, one who is facing this gender discrimination and sexual harassment.
See, the first thing is that, generally nowadays, what the organizations are doing is that they are giving this awareness and orientations relating to gender discrimination and sexual harassment of women at workplace. And many of the organizations are supposedly to be having anti-sexual harassment policies in place. Now, there are two things here. Now, say, for example, a woman is in the unorganized sector. Now, say for example, she's working with as a domestic help, or in some kind of an unorganized sector, where in her organization she does not have this mechanism. A complaint mechanism is not there, or she does not know where to go in her own organization. Now, the Sexual Harassment of Women Act 2013 has a provision which is called as the LCC. LCC means Local Complaints Committee, which takes complaints relating to sexual harassment of women at workplace in case the organization itself does not have this complaint mechanism. Maybe because the organization does not have it at all, or maybe because the organization does not have employees which are 10 in number. So because the act generally, the act says that it has to be employees which is 10 or more than 10 in order to have a ICC, that is an internal complaints committee. Now on the other hand, if a woman has an internal complaints committee in her organization, and if a woman is going through this harassment, the first thing that she needs to do is that she needs to put it in writing and file the complaint before the internal complaints committee. That is the first step. But a woman, most importantly, will need to realize, will need to understand that these are not occupational hazards. These do not happen to a woman because maybe she asked for it, or maybe she did something wrong. She did something bad because of this happens. It is okay to speak about it. There's absolutely nothing taboo about speaking about sexual harassment. She has been wronged and she requires to get a remedy. So this is something which will have to get into a woman's head, where she's able to understand that just because I'm complaining does not mean that I'm in the wrong. People are not going to look at me as if I have done something wrong. So this kind of victim blaming, which is very common in offenses relating to women and gender violence, I think this kind of mindset will have to be looked at, but that requires a lot of effort, lot of will to do these kinds of things. But one thing is definitely that, I mean, any of the people who are seeing this program today, I think one thing I definitely want to convey, and in very, clear terms and crystal clear, is that a woman who has gone through this will have every right under the law to approach the law either in her own organization or through the LCC to give her complaint. Now, gender discrimination also is dealt under the Gender Discrimination Committee or under the HR purview or under the Gender Discrimination Committee, though ICC as such in many of the organizations might not take that. Okay, so what I'm saying is that there is a law, and a woman just needs to be aware that a law like this exists. Whatever she has suffered is a wrong in the first place, and this wrong will have to be righted. This wrong will require to be remedied. I think that is one thing that will go very clearly in her head. It has to.
Yeah. So before I go for taking the questions from the participants, I would like to ask one last question. This is actually, the world of social media. So some years back, there was a movement called the Me Too movement. The woman actually came forward and opened up in the social media. They came up with, against all these sexual harassments and discrimination across different sectors. But after certain time, if you see that the Me Too event in India, if you see, that was actually diluted by coming up with some false allegations by some celebrities in India. So it's a totally, diverted into a different movement. Actually, end of the day, we got a different, face value on that Me Too movement. So how do you see this, even when you coming up with some solid movement against all these, the as a society, as a conditioning system itself, it is being diverted and it is being, converted into something else end of the day. So how do you see this?
See, this was the same allegation that was there, even against Section 498A of IPC, which deals with mental cruelty. Now, where a woman suffers mental cruelty in her matrimonial home. Now, the whole point was that there was the thing which said that a woman uses it to revenge, a woman uses it to retaliate. There is so much of misuse of this, and therefore this will have to be looked at with lot of apprehension and things like that. Now, you just tell me and just think about it. In which law is there? Which law does not have violations? Every law is misused. There is violations to every law. This happens everywhere. It is not as if it has to be a law which is gender specific, which will only be misused. Any law is misused. Any law is circumvented. It is not just a women specific law which is circumvented. Of course, things like this happen, and we always say one very important thing. Whenever we are speaking about gender equality, don't forget equality means equality. Equality is not a special thing, is not a privilege that you give to one gender. Equality is the harmonization factor which naturally should be there in the society. So if a woman asks for equality, she's not asking for anything that is special. It is something that is due to her. It is something that she'll have to get, and therefore she has a right to it. Now, having said that, Me Too movement, yes, of course. I mean, Me Too was that very courageous platform where there were many women who opened out, and which actually led to lot of that eye opener kind of a thing, which that maybe the other gender also felt that it is not about a man and a woman only. It was about the act of that act of sexual harassment by itself per se, which kind of was an eye opener, and which people felt that now this is not going to be the private space anymore. From the private space, it will move to the public space, so we need to be careful about it. I think that was that one break that it put, and it was really good. And so far as the dilution is concerned, no, I don't agree with that. I don't think the dilution happened because one or two women misused it. Now let us understand that all women are not angels and all men are not demons. It is not the whole point. This is not what a woman equality or a feminist movement is trying to say. Now this is about just questioning certain deep rooted inequalities which has taken the shape of social inequality. That is all. So other than that, it is not about questioning any person, or it is not about trying to lay the blame on the other gender. That is not what equality is all about. So it completely creates chaotic situation if it is so. So
Thank
there was absolutely, the Me Too movement did not have dilutions. It did have oppositions, just like any other case would have. I mean, just like you have a case which has an opposition. This would be the same thing here also, but not really because it was a Me Too movement and Me Too movement got diluted. No, I don't think so. I don't think it happened so at all.
Yeah, thank you. We got quite a few questions from the participants. Let me go one by one. One Mr. Chandu, okay, Chandu Kaki asked this. In many fields like electricians, mechanics, where there is physical work exists in job, it is very rare to find women in many nations. That is what we also discussed. How can nation like India, who is facing quality labor problem, can overcome when we go with these biases?
Yeah, see, of course, I think this is such a valid question. And I will just tell you a very, I forget the name of that case, but I should Google it and send it to Professor
Yeah, I
Satish.
will be
Now,
sad.
there was this case where you have the linemen, okay? Linemen are electricians who have to go up the wall and who have to do that lining job. You have that electrical cables, they have to do their job. Now, what happened was that once there was this, call for linemen. It was called linemen because it could never have been imagined that a woman will apply for a job like this. So these were known as linemen. Now, what happened? A woman applied for job, and the argument in the opposition went that a woman could not do this job. The reason because a lineman will have to climb onto the pole in order to do that electrical cabling, and therefore it is not within a woman's domain. Where can she climb up on that pole? Now, such a beautiful and such a witted answer was given by the court, by the Kerala High Court, where it said, remember, you have something called ladders, correct? Now, who's asking you to climb up on the wall? Don't you have ladders? So a ladder, a man also can climb, a woman also can climb, isn't it? So this was a very, a small example to say how if you have to want women to come into to fill up a gap, then it is important that that organization be gender sensitive. Gender sensitive. Now, say for example, under the Factories Act, you have statutory provisions relating to childcare, relating to feeding mothers, relating to separate washrooms for women, things like that. I think these kinds of things will definitely help a woman come in more. And the kind of the skill orientation that will have to be given to her, lot of occasional awareness that will have to be given to her will have to increase. So that is the reason why you're seeing it is off late. You're seeing auto drivers who are women, bus drivers are women, conductors are women. It is now coming up in open like that. It is not happening.
Yeah. So the other question is from Swarnit. Stress is laid more on working women when confined to her house during this pandemic. What about those women who are housewives? How can a housewife situation be addressed and be made it name?
Yeah, see, housewife situation, what you're asking is, so right, Swarnit. See, the reason is because, you have this whole economics which is called unpaid labor.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand unpaid labor is a very important conceptualization within economics, which takes the chunk of the whole thing, where the economists and the researchers and writers and feminists have been moving in the direction where they have been insisting and stressing upon this very important concept and telling that women's unpaid labor will have to be taken into consideration when you look at the economy itself. No, that is very important, because if you leave out that part, see, work is being done, but there is no value for that work being done. There is a woman who's on her job completely, but then there is no value attached to it. And there was this one joke which said that a man asks another man, what is your wife doing? And he says, nothing, she's just a housewife. And she gets up at 5 o'clock to water the plants. She's just a housewife, you see. And then she cooks. But don't forget, she's just a housewife. Then she educates the children. She takes the children to school. She prepares food. She waits for me. She prepares dinner. She keeps the house clean, but she's just a housewife. Now, this was a satire to say that don't forget the unpaid labor that goes on in the work, but that is now receiving a lot of recognition. But how it is going to be taken and how we are going to move forward, that we have to see. But that's a very important concept which economics recognizes.
Yeah. Yeah, the other question is here, is female emotionally more weak than a male and gets trapped easily? Because I have watched a documentary where women are trapped by pimps easily by giving emotional support. In that case, anyone can take advantage of emotions. If yes, what would be the solution to come out?
Whether a female is emotionally more weak than a man. Now, I will just answer this question from my perspective, and trying to understand this like this. We have to unfortunately go back to the conditional aspect again when I have to answer this question, not per se about the woman's emotion herself. See, a woman who has, the biological capacity to give birth to a baby and to bring life to earth, to take care and to have that maternal instinct. I think, as a gender, there could be nobody who's more stronger than a woman. That's a different thing altogether. But why this thing happens? I mean, in fact, even when I was doing this one talk on cyber violence and violence against women, now it was seen that it is women who become victimized, and how they become victimized is more because of the emotional victimization that happens to a woman. Now, solely from my perspective, I feel, see, if a woman has this pressure in the society where she thinks that she is responsible for the family. Now, say for example, she's a single mother or she's a divorced wife, where it is very difficult for a woman to live in the society, and she has taken it upon herself that she will have to look after all these things. Maybe then I think that emotional thing will definitely apply to her, because she has to run the family and she has to take care of the family. Maybe that way I think emotionally she does get a little weaker on that respect. Though I think, like I said, I think it is that the conditioning of the society again, which wants to see a perfect woman who's taking care and who's not going for anything which does matter. Maybe, I mean, that might be the reason, because of the social conditionings that she exists in.
Yeah, there is another question from Swarnit. During menstruation, till date, women are not allowed to take part in any activities. So, do you think a specific statute would solve this issue rather than just mere talk?
Yeah, just like the way, we have this saying which says charity begins at home. I think these are also the kinds of the things which should start beginning at home. So to say that, now say for example, there was a time when she would not be allowed inside the house, and the way the house would be constructed itself during the olden times, she would be made to sit outside the house, and she was untouchable for that 5 days. But then slowly we realized that those things have blurred, and it is not as as strict as it used to be, stringent as it used to be at one point of time. So I think it is a conditioning which should have at home, which we should be able to educate our own daughters and tell that this is a biological thing, and it has got nothing to do with you being dirty or you being unholy during that time. It has got nothing to do with all that thing. It is a biological thing, and it will have to just be taken as naturally as like that.
Yeah. This is from Roswine. Okay, so if woman is became men's success, so who's became woman's success?
I think it should be another woman only. I think women and women should hold hands. Women should uplift each other, and they should go together. I think behind every woman there is another woman who understands her, and of course, trying to be, of course, trying to also look at the other side of reality. There are also men who are gender proactive. There are also men who are gender sensitive, not to leave them at all in the loop. But one thing is definitely there. I think it is easier for one woman to talk to another woman, maybe about her childcare or about her own gender specific health issue and what she's going through. So I think women do have that collective responsibility to take each other along. That's a very important thing that we need to realize.
Yeah. I think we are done with the questions. Actually, we had a very wonderful discussion for about more than an hour. We normally have for an hour, so we extended it for another 10 minutes because of very beautiful and very important questions being asked by the participants. So, what I can see throughout this session and what I can personally also realize is men and women are not, are not we are complement we need to complement each other. It's not something men became women or women became woman, men. It's something we should move along. We should take the journey together. So it's all about togetherness, and it coming to that gender inequality and giving equal treatment for a woman is not something I as a man giving it to a woman. It's not so. When it is something they naturally have. We should not, as a men, we should not stop their natural way of living. So that is what I can understand from all these conversation with Dr. Swapna. So with this is actually personally it is an eye opener for me. Of course, I believe it will be an eye opener for many of the mates watching this session, and it will be an very much empowered session for the women those who are watching, and it will give them a confidence. It will give them some kind of a boost to take it forward in a very beautiful life with all these support system and all these directions and guidelines and wonderful insights given by Dr. Sapna. Thank you very much, Dr. Sapna, for joining us, and
Thank
you
you.
had a wonderful session today. Thanks for all of your excellent insights.
Thank you so much, Professor Satish. It's been, I have loved this session too. This is something that I'm emotionally so attached to. So I have loved this session too. And all your questions were so beautifully, put out and so well. The flow was. Thank you so much. Now, in this whole show, even if there is one person who's able to take this to the heart and understand the importance of gender sensitivity for a society, and particularly for the pandemic times that we are going through, I think this program is a huge success. Thank you so much
Thank you very much.
for putting me on air. Thank you.
Yes.